Hey, Anthony,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on the military gathering that happened today?
Unfortunately, it is pretty much exactly what I and other content creators predicted it would be, which is to say that it was a call for an oath of loyalty to the Trump administration and a chance for them to continue their war, literally in their words, against the left in the United States, as well as implement or re implement a bunch of bigoted policies in the U.S. military.
How did they use this meeting to target the left?
Well, Trump spent basically his entire 62-minute speech calling the left the enemy within. He's reminded the military leaders that their oath of office essentially calls for them to protect the United States from enemies both foreign and domestic, and he really emphasized domestic. He calls the left the enemy within, and then he tells the military that they should use American cities, which notably tend to be left, as training grounds for the military. So he's suggesting that they go in and take violent military action against U.S. citizens. He tells ICE and presumably the military as well, which he's tried to deploy to U.S. cities previously, that they should do whatever they want to protesters, which are no different from any foreign enemy. And, completely putting aside all of the fascist nonsense for just a moment, although we will certainly talk about that, the idea of the US military attacking American cities as a whole, because he really emphasizes like the whole idea of American cities are where the enemy is. American cities, metropolitan areas, account for 90% of the US GDP and 80% of the US population. So, what Trump is really calling for is for the military to attack and disrupt American cities, which account for the majority of the population and economic prosperity of the country. So, if they did that, the country would basically fall apart even faster, which I think is part of the plan. So, he says all of this, and then he tells these generals there, which these are the top people in the US military. They've earned their stripes. They've come from all over the world at great expense to U.S. taxpayers, and I'm sure huge security concerns to come sit for what essentially is a high school level rant from Trump and Hegseth. And he tells them that if they don't like what they're hearing, they can leave, and then he threatens their careers and futures. Right? This is Trump, a notable draft dodger and convicted sexual offender, and Pete Hegseth, a Fox News anchor, speaking this way to some of the top military commanders in the world. And then, on top of everything Trump said, which is, of course, bad enough by itself, Hegseth takes the time to say a bunch of racist, sexist, misogynistic, and homophobic nonsense. It calls for re-implementation of all sorts of related policies in the U.S. military, specifically using a lot of right-wing dog whistles and terminology that was very common back in the 90s about physical fitness tests. And, we're going to do these American Warrior top level male peak physical fitness tests. And, if women can't do them, that's their fault and they just won't be admitted. Of course, in line with MAGA and Project 2025, he talks a lot about gay and transgender military members and how they shouldn't be allowed to serve. And he even calls for the reintroduction of military hazing rituals that were banned decades ago for very good reason. So, the whole speech by both Trump and Hegseth is just awful, very fascist. The whole idea of there being an enemy within and that we need to return to the good old days, the call for the personal oath of loyalty from the military, tracks incredibly clearly with all sorts of different fascist dictatorships that have existed in the past, and is, very scary for the path that the United States is going down at this time.